Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Daryl Gay. I'm a part of Aaron Fox, and I am here today with my co-host of the program, Jay Jamrock, I4CP. As I said, this is our second session of the series on future of work. We have heard from a whole host of people that there are all these questions about what do we do now that we're out of the pandemic? What is the world going to look like? What's the workspace going to look like? Everybody's got the questions, and I don't know if we have the answers, but we're going to have some good discussion that I think might generate some thought.
We're going to have some fun. So let's introduce our two panelists today. So Reginald Odom, why not, you have a tremendously varied and, I'm kind of envious kind of background. Could you give us a little bit about your background and your experiences that you've had over the years?
So sure, I'm Reggie Odom. I'm currently the Senior Vice President and Chief People Officer at Hospital for Special Surgery. And for those who may not be familiar with HSS, it's kind of the world's leading musculoskeletal medical organization, focusing primarily on orthopedic and rheumatoid care. I've been with the HSS for about 2 years now, and my background in short is, I came out of college and practiced in HR for about 5 years at a company bouncing across different locations throughout the U.S. It was a chemicals, metals, and ammunition manufacturer that I worked for about 5 years. And then I went back to law school. I decided I wanted to be an employment and labor lawyer. And after doing that, worked for Proskauer Rose for a number of years as an employment attorney, and then went in-house, moving to Mount Sinai Hospital. Then I went to NYU Medical Center, and then kind of moved back to the HR world at NYU and stayed there for about 12 years, and eventually moved to another organization that supported primarily physicians called Physician Affiliate Group of New York. They supported New York City health and hospitals, and then came to HSS just a couple of years ago. So it's been a fun ride so far.
Oh, thank you, Reg. Yeah, it's quite a background you have. And Barry and I have been friends for a while. I first met Barry when he was CHRO at Amtrak, and we've been together again when he was CHRO at US Steel. Tell us a little bit about your background, and also I want to hear about what you think you want to do for your next adventure.
Well, thanks, Jay, and welcome everybody. Looking forward to a great conversation here and appreciate the privilege of your time today. Look, I've worked for more companies than I ever thought I did, but the benefit of that was they were largely all market leading companies, private equity, Fortune 5, small cap, often in turnaround or some kind of growth situation of massive scale. And what I learned in being a market leading business, there is no one right way. And so I, got exposed to a lot of great mentorship along the way that helped me grow and develop as well in my career, and wanted to give that back to any teams that I've led. The other twist for me is that most companies seemingly have always tried to snag me out of HR. I've been a controller in a Fortune 500 company. In another company, I was tagged to go into an entrepreneurial startup, $150 million business, and lead that for a period of time as well. And on it went. So it's not a typical HR kind of career path that I think really broadened me out. Certainly the way I look at it today. I did retire after 5.5 years at US Steel, a phenomenal ride. Kudos to Dave Burritt. Best wishes to the entire team at US Steel. They are rocking it. And we certainly had financial headwinds when I joined in 2017, and Dave just ascended to the CEO role, and then to see that grow into record financial performance in 2021. And then on the talent culture piece, which is, maybe I'll just share a little bit of the purpose of that is, I grew up in a US Steel family. My dad was a welder and a blue collar guy. He was a union guy the day he died. He would love to know that I was leading negotiations for US Steel with the USW, although he had seen me lead negotiations in many other great companies. But this was very purposeful because it hit home. In my neck of the woods in Western Pennsylvania, when the Johnstown, Pennsylvania facility of US Steel closed, Bethlehem Steel went out of business. The area was devastated. The mines closed as well. And for me, middle-class American manufacturing jobs are critical. And that was my purpose coming back to US Steel, because I've actually failed retirement 3 times, trying to avoid a 4th as well at this point in time. I had an 865 requirement in the company. It was well known to me when I got hired. And so being a Section 16er, that was the requirement. And so I just can't believe how fast the time has flown by. And, next steps we'll see. I've already taken a couple interviews with a couple of different companies and said no to 1 or 2. Looking at something else currently, actually have another call right after this call for another opportunity. So it's interesting and humbling in a way. But so we'll see, Jay. I hope our paths cross again.
They will. They always seem to. Yes. So this is of course around the future of work, and I'm a futurist, and Daryl and I have had, I don't know how many conversations over the last a number of years we've known each other about the future of work, and they're always very stimulating. One of the things that Daryl and I are seeing as we're talking to our members, his clients, et cetera, is how to figure out what this hybrid's all about. Where is it going? One of our members yesterday was telling me that they put in a thing like, you can come in, we want you to come to the office, and you got the option of 2 to 4 days a week. Well, nobody did 4, everybody did 2, because they knew they had it, and it seems like it's too rigid in some cases or too flexible in others. So the empathy versus productivity kind of conundrum that some of will come with, and lack of intentionality of coming to the office. There's just a lot of confusion. So, put your future hat on. You don't have to talk about your company in particular, but where do you think this is going, Reg?
And Reg, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to tweak that a little bit of question.
Go ahead.
I keep hearing people say they think this is a fad, that in 3 years it'll be all over and we'll be back to work. So what the question Jay just had, fact that in and tell us what you think.
Yeah. Okay,
So
go ahead.
sure. Happy to respond to that one. I do not think it's a fad. I think it's the future. And I think flexibility is the future. And it's part of, to me, a bigger issue is maintaining the culture of an organization. I think you're going to have some measure of flexibility. In short, I think during this process, during the pandemic, everybody was looking for the day it was going to end. Well, as you can see, we're still looking for the day that it's going to end.
Yeah, your hospital beds are still full, I bet.
Exactly. I think, you're going to still have an evolution. I don't know that we'll ever get back to where we were. I think that for the jobs that can afford to do it or have the ability to, there's always going to be some measure of flexibility. So I think that's got to be baked into the way we work. I think there's some organizations who've made the call and said, everybody come back to work. And then my question would be, how's that working out for them? So far, what I see, it's not working out so well. A lot of people are responding with their feet and moving on somewhere else where there's flexibility. I can tell you, as we recruit talent, one of the first questions we get is, how many days do I have to be in the office? Literally one of the first questions. And it's a balance. I think you're trying to look at the market and the kind of jobs you're trying to recruit for, and you want to be competitive. If we said to everybody who was working at HSS, tomorrow that you have to be in the office 5 days a week, we know we would lose talent. So I think we're going to continue to maintain that flexibility into the future. I don't see it going back. Do I think there will be more people slowly coming back to the office? I do think so. I think over the next couple of years, we'll get back to more people in the office, because I think people like it from a productivity standpoint. I think people like it from a camaraderie and teamwork standpoint and collaboration, but I don't think we'll ever go back to 5 days in the office.
Well, human beings are social animals, and part of going to work, especially if you're a young person, is the socialization you get. As you get a little older with families and that, maybe that's a little bit different, but I know young single people definitely want to go back to work. And Barry, talking about the flexibility, I use a quote from your CEO, and you wouldn't think about US Steel being a company that has latched onto and advocated flexibility, but I'm going to mess up the quote. I know I am, but he says something like, if you're in a company that doesn't offer flexibility, call me. Something like that.
That's definitely in the ballpark for Dave Burke. So,
okay.
we certainly have embraced work from anywhere. We have found it to be working very successfully for us. when I was at US Steel. But I would say just in general, there were issues though, when you take a look at, if you're an essential industry, which certain companies were, and folks couldn't stay at home. So those folks kind of braved COVID, right? And did not have an opportunity to work from home. And now you've got this, well, the remaining 10% of your workforce was being portrayed as unfair. Why would we require one group and not another group?
This us and them kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, one worked hard at then was changing the conversation from a fairness conversation to a practical conversation. It's impractical for a large number of workers to work from home given their duties, but it was practical for another segment too. And if you're in business, aren't you about being practical and flexing according to your circumstances? And so I think that can get you down the road a little ways. But I do think there are some other headwinds for all of this. I'm not so sure it's a fad as, again, a practical conversation. When you have long-term leases that you can't get out of, if you have just built a corporate Taj Mahal somewhere, that you're now stuck with that overhang. I think those are practical considerations as well. I think the industry you're in can play into it. But what I've actually found, it's really up to the CEO. If the CEO buys into it, that's the way you're working. If the CEO doesn't buy into it, you're probably not going to be working that way, and being on other calls with other colleagues and how, CEO driven it is. I do think probably my prediction is post-COVID, and I always said about 3 years after COVID dies, probably the world probably looks more pre-COVID than post-COVID. But I think what stays is the willingness of companies to work with employees. I think the flexibility piece will be around. I don't know that that means you're not back 5 days a week, but it may mean if you need more time off to work from home to accommodate things, I think that's an easier putt.
Yeah, I think letting managers lead people is going to be one of the key issues going forward, based on the practicality, based on what's going on, based on, listening to what is going on with the employees in your group and your team, et cetera. Daryl, I interrupted you.
That's fine. So both Reggie and Barry, you hit on a very interesting point that I'm quite sure most of the attendees are all confronted. I've got all this space and I want my employees to come because I'm paying rent anyway. All right. And then you got the dilemma of, you're right, both of you guys have people who they can't work from home, but you have other people who do want to work from home. And we've got this whole factor with some people just saying, if you're not working, let me work from home, I'm not coming to work for you. And all companies want the best and the greatest talent, so they have to have that flexibility. How are you guys navigating that issue? Because I know everybody on the call is kind of figuring out, what do I do with this?
I'll jump in first because I literally just left a 2-hour meeting where we were talking about workspace optimization. It's very fresh off of my mind. I literally walked into this meeting from that. And really what our goal is kind of take a look at what everybody's talked about, what Barry mentioned. We have some long-term leases, certain places, so we're kind of stuck there. So let's utilize the space most effectively. But we do have some leases that are rolling over and we can kind of utilize the space better. And we're always looking for additional room for clinical space. So what can we decamp from where our, main campus is to get more clinical space and move it to some of the other spaces? So we're looking at reorienting, we're looking at how do we maximize the space? If people are in 2 or 3 days a week, moving people to understand the concept of sharing offices and sharing space, potentially hoteling and reserving space for people who are spending more time remote. So we're trying to make a systematic approach for people to be able to reserve space and have some dedicated space if they're in the office a lot, but also educating them about how we're going to use the space more flexibly so that we can control cost moving forward.
Yeah, Barry, I'm torn. We've had a flexible work environment since 1986. I mean, we've had it forever. But I like the socialization. I do like. We can collaborate fine. Our culture is not our office. I know that, etc. But damn, I do like to talk to people, and I do like to talk to my colleagues. And I think, as Reg was sort of looking at the workspace and how do we utilize it better to accommodate the kind of intentional collaboration you may need, the intentional socialization you may need. I'm sure you are thinking about all this. So what's your 2 cents on it?
I mean, the reaction I get, even going to conferences, God, it's great to be with people.
I get our
Mhm.
last conference was the best party I've ever been to.
I will say in my quick trip, and I mentioned this before, in talking to another company about another opportunity who had been work from anywhere, they're not excited about that prospect anymore because they don't think that actually helped the company performance. And the team was very distributed. And so, you've got that piece as well. And then as I met people in corporate, they all said, actually, love working from home. But when it comes to my work colleagues, I do like being back in the office. Now, is that 3 days, 4 days, 5 days? They're pretty much on the 5-day page already. So they went from hybrid to back to 5 largely. But they are saying, hey, we can be flexible, for certain individuals as well. So I don't know. I know that I've seen a study or two from some internal studies from at least one company I'm aware of, where higher performing teams actually morphed from loving working hybridly when COVID started to after a year and a half to wanting to be in more often. I think some of the ways to address that was going back old school. If you can do this, if you're making money, you really can't do it if you're not making money. But things like offsite meetings in decent locations, and getting together for
hub meetings and things like
2
that.
or 3 days, and then you disband again for 2 or 3 months, but you're back and you're really socializing and you're bonding for the time that you in fact are together, was one way to continue to build and maintain that close relationship.
Well, I know our account management team meets like every quarter in some facility somewhere. Our sales team does meet together as a team every once in a while, just to go over as a team and keep bonding. So that concept of intentional socialization, I think, is important, and I think that's going to be part of our future too. Maybe not fully in the workplace, but Dan, we do need to talk once in a while.
I would just ask, maybe it's me, but maybe some others have had this reaction. The one thing that I almost freaked out when I did go back into the office and met people. Now I'd been seeing people, we're living on Teams and WebEx this whole time. So I'd be seeing people day to day, but after, 2.5 years of this, you see someone in person and it's like, are they who I think they are? Somehow.
Well, you're taller than I thought.
Oh, I've had that
exactly.
comment many times.
I don't know, it was a weird thing for me.
So guys, let's look at something. And I know this is true. We keep hearing in the news about there being more jobs than people, the great resignation, quiet quitting, that it's hard to find staff people. So let's ask the question, is there really more jobs than people? Is that the problem we're confronting? Or is the problem that companies can't find people with the necessary skill sets of the jobs? Have the jobs themselves changed such that you need a different skill set?
Yeah, that's the question. Next question I was going to ask too, Karen. I'll just build upon a little bit. More and more, we're seeing that if you look at the top 10 jobs in types of growth, they all have some technology relationship. I don't care what it is. It's all in. World Economic Forum has said that 50% of the workforce has to be upskilled or reskilled in the next few years. And companies aren't good at this. It's not just high-tech jobs, but it's manufacturing jobs. We have had so much offshoring of manufacturing that we have been neglecting building skills for the manufacturing sector, especially with the new technology in the manufacturing sector. So, on a skill level, I'd like to address it with Barry first. What do you do? How are you thinking about the skills in the future? Not just at US Steel, but what do you think companies should be doing today to prepare that talent supply chain that we're going to need for those technical skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, ideally, if you could have that great crystal ball and know the skill sets that are needed, and I think some of that you can predetermine at least 3 to 5 years out, or at least 3 years out, you should start your worker of the future skill set now. The flip side to that is training can be expensive. And if you guess wrong, you have waste, you've destroyed enterprise value. And I'm all about creating enterprise value. And is it better to have a model that says, you know what, as long as we know where we can go to get the skills, do we have to necessarily train people up as much or as fully as some pundits would predict you might need to? I think that's a really slippery slope, but I think that's the question I would recommend an organization at least have as a question to ask themselves. Is it better to build or buy?
But I gotta say though, and Daryl and I have had this discussion a lot, the school system is lacking. And they're teaching skills and everything from decades ago. Professors with yellow notes that are going to just disappear because they're just so old and decrepit. We just are not, our schools, even our technical schools, are just not up to speed. So, you know, what we have been discussing is there, I know you can't predict where the skills are going to be and the investment is there, but is there some economically viable way to collaborate with schools, with the local communities, with maybe even your own people being teachers in tech schools and things like that, that are not going to cost you an arm and a leg, but will give impetus for the local community to start investing in education again?
That's a great point. I think if you're on top of this, you're already down that in terms of creating those relationships. Although sometimes that comes with a request of funding and often significant funding for curriculum. And I think at that point in time, you've got to figure out how far do you spread your peanut butter, you know, and going to really be crisp about the select schools that you would partner, community channels that you engage in.
Reggie,
I was going to jump in.
Your head. You were shaking.
No, I was going to jump in and say something very similar to Barry. I think it's a question about how much are you willing to invest. And I think from a practical standpoint, organizations look for, you know, how can they identify places that already have the tools and equipment and the skills that they need, and the schools that are teaching the things they need. We're kind of hesitant to put a lot of investment into something that is not going to reap us a lot of reward. And I think in an ideal world, if you could see the future, you would kind of think about how to do that a little bit better. And maybe that's something organizations need to spend a little time and dedicate some resources to. But what we tend to do is look at the practical in the now, and here are the gaps that I have today. How do I fix that? How do I close those gaps? Do I reevaluate what I need? Do I really need what I thought I needed? Can I do it with some other mechanism, a combination of things? So I think organizations tend to think very practically and efficiently about how to get the
but is that the old school? I know both Barry and you have said the same thing, but is there something about investing in the future of our society?
Well, let me take one step farther. Don't you, as the companies and the schools, have a shared interest? To a certain degree, as employers, you need a pipeline of future employees. As schools, they need to be able to make sure when their graduates come out, they have a place to go work. And if I don't understand, well, maybe I just can't appreciate what's the downside of sitting down with the chancellors, the curriculum developers, and saying, hey, listen, here's what we're projecting we need in the talent pool coming out of your schools that in our areas of work. And them saying, here's what we work with you guys to get that done. What's the downside of that?
Well, the one big problem, Daryl, is, you know, when we talked about our workforce planning exchange, you know, they don't know. They don't know the skills they have. They don't know the skills they're going to need in the future. They don't know. And they're living like from quarter to quarter. And these are people who are trained in strategic workforce planning. It's one of those times now where, you know, are you going to buy it or are you going to build it? And where are you going to place your bucks and your bets today? Because the long-term strategic planning for companies for their workforce, they don't know.
Well, I'm going to give it
27% of companies said LinkedIn knows more about our employees than we do.
I would say I've tried to engage in that with a very few limited number of universities. But the conversation kind of went like this. There's that opportunity. And while they may be able to design a curriculum for your needs, if that college views themselves as for-profit and making money too, will what my company require the university be applicable to the broader student base? Because then how many students will we end up recruiting from that school? I mean, it's an economic discussion for them as well.
Yeah.
But Barry, there's some skill sets. I grant you that the particular sets that you might need to do your particular job, there might be some unique skill sets that they need refined. But I think what Jay and I are hitting on are some of the fundamental skill sets to position them so that to the degree they come into your company, you need to train them up to refine them. You have that foundation to get that done. I mean, we keep hearing about the shifting away from the hiring based upon credentials, whether they have a high school degree, a college degree, and you got the 110 Coalition that looking at the concept of doing it based upon skill sets versus credentials. So the degree skill sets, how do you guys, and I'm giving you more credit than Jay is, I'm assuming you've done a little more planning than, the next year, 1 month or two. What are you guys doing to make sure that you have, what can you suggest companies do to make sure they are in position so at least the next 3 to 5 years, they know what they need?
Well, some of it is if you're buying an piece of equipment, you're tied into what's that it's usually a technological change. What skill sets do people need, and approach it that way, which may have nothing to do with the school or university per se.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think seeing what you're actually doing inside is one way to upgrade the skill sets of your workforce, making sure you're tied, making sure, say, supply chain or procurement is tied into saying, hey, make sure the training is very robust from the supplier of that piece of equipment. So our folks have the skill sets that are needed, the assessments that are needed, that we can pick and place the right folks in those roles and be ready to operate that equipment safely and effectively when it comes online. There's another avenue there, I think, in the supply chain itself.
Yeah. And Rich, technology is just not in the manufacturing or the high-tech play companies like, Microsoft and those. Technology in the healthcare industry is exploding. So how are you going to keep up with all that? I mean, it's just ridiculous kind of needs.
It's a challenge, and I've always found healthcare to be one of those kinds of fields where they tend to be a little slower to adopt some of the technology. But I think it's more along the lines that Barry articulated. If we're going to buy some new piece of equipment, our investment is going to be with that manufacturer or that supplier to make sure we have the right tools and education and knowledge about how to manage it, and make sure we have people who've run it somewhere else, those people on board. It tends not to be going back to an educational standpoint or credential standpoint. It's, have you actually done it? Have you used it? Those are the people we're looking for.
Yeah.
But Reggie, the reality is, with R&D being what it is, the development and sophistication of equipment is happening at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
So necessarily, when you have a shortage of people with talents, how do you fill that gap of finding people who might know how to use the equipment? You say have the people who can do how do you find them?
So it's hard, and one of the things that we are proud of is in the organization is that we have an innovation group that kind of stays on top of a lot of the technology, and we're involved in, particularly because of the orthopedic work we do, in developing and testing a lot of the technology. So we get the opportunity sometimes to build some in-house skills and have some in-depth knowledge into the different areas, and that gives us insight into what we need. Who are the kinds of people we need? What's the experiences we need to kind of go out and get? But it's a challenge because finding people with a lot of these technical skills is hard. Sometimes they're like unicorns. You can only find a couple of them throughout the country, and you have to kind of find a way to convince them that this is the place to be.
Yeah.
And I think to build on that too, Rachel's saying, I agree with him 100%. What's your brand? I mean, you still got to have the brand that says, why come to your company when you have a buffet of other companies to choose from? So the notion of your skills are not, you will not get obsoleted at, or be obsolesced wherever company you're going to because there's lack of investment in you. I know that in some companies have invested a lot in online training with some very quality programs. connecting to various universities that are all virtually online now and tapping into that. And so if you build that library where it's self-selection for employees, or you build that into succession planning, which is the other way outside the universities, like we see roles, okay, so who will we bet on? Who might be the best incumbents for those roles in a few years? Would you encourage those folks to do some of these online courses and getting ready? That's a conversation I think that can be had as well.
So question, you guys, I see a comment in the Q&A that kind of leads us to the next section we talked about. We talked a lot about recruiting and identifying people. What about retaining people? And I think the Q&A question suggests the idea of the company positioning itself so people are always in the ability to continue learning and developing new skill sets. What's your thought about what is you seeing being done in companies towards that goal?
So I think Barry was touching on it just a minute ago. I think what's
Mhm.
critical to people is that they see a pathway, that they see development opportunities for themselves. They see that they can grow in the organization. And I do think a lot of this ties back to the culture that you establish in an organization. You have to establish a culture that people feel attracted to. I like to tell people one of the things I love about HSS is I feel like our culture is physical and tangible. I feel like it can touch it and taste it. It's real, and it's about every day we're trying to look for a way to get better. And you have to kind of make sure people understand that message. And getting better means that you can do something innovative. If you have an idea, you're given the freedom to run with that idea. And you're developing along a certain path, we're going to help you develop along that path. And we're going to help you chart a career and a future. So that's why we want you to kind of be on board with our organization. And I think that's a message you have to get across to people. And again, it goes back to making sure you have a solid foundation in culture.
Yeah,
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, the whole area, a couple of remarks in the Q&A about lifetime learners or learning new skills. That's good. I agree with it, but there are tons of people who don't have those opportunities inside companies, even good companies, where they seem to be stuck in a job. And I've seen one new next practice that I think is very interesting, and that's, there's this whole concept of the gig market. And you can get on these platforms and sell your skills on not just Uber drivers. I'm talking about Upwork and platforms like that, where you can sell for projects, etc. There's a whole movement now towards internal gig markets, where you can create your own brand inside of a company. What my skills are, what I want to learn, what my skills are, and put myself out there in an internal gig market to continue to learn new skills. It sounds kind of far-fetched, but I think that is a way for people to build up skills without having to get those credentials.
One of the things that we try to do with our org learning group is kind of talk to people about those very topics you mentioned, Jay. We talk to people about developing in place and sometimes going sideways to go up. Everything isn't
Or take on project.
Yeah, take on a project. It's how do you highlight the skills that you have? Who are the people in the organization that you don't know that you need to meet that might allow you to get involved in a project that allows you to develop and grow? And our leader of org learning does a really good job of helping people navigate the organization to figure out where to make those connections. And that's part of the process that we try to engage in to help people develop.
Barry, what do you, are you involved or have you been involved in whether it's not just you at Still, but other companies? And we've been doing a lot. We started doing a lot of research with the Aspen Institute around upskilling and reskilling America. And there's been a lot of talk about companies investing in upskilling their current workforce or reskilling them. Where are you on that continuum? Have you done a lot in that area, or do you think that we need to do more?
I would say that the companies I've been associated with have always done a better job of training people up to the roles they need to get to.
Yeah.
At Amtrak, we were part of a couple of presidential kind of initiatives around apprenticeship programs and so forth at national scale.
Yeah,
I do
the
think
Obama
that
Upskill America project, we were part of that.
I mean, because when you say upskill, I always let's not always talk about senior level roles. It's,
Right.
you know, turn the wrench people that are
Well-
making things happen out there out
Welding.
of a farm or someplace like that. And that's, you know, not necessarily a German model of apprenticeship, but, you know, where are the vocational technical schools in America for a competitive edge? I think I mentioned to you before, quality begins with your hire at the high school level. You know, maybe it's not even so much technical skills, but, you know, operationally, like teach kids today that you must be on time, you must be punctual, you have responsibility and accountability. They probably are very good with their apps and the technology, but it's the other piece that, you know, maybe they are not as strong at, and there's opportunity there. So, you know, but the apprenticeship program and technical trade skills, I think, is something from a societal level that would pay off for the United States, particularly since I've been in manufacturing predominantly in my career. I'm really sensitive to those skills.
Why
So
do you
Barry,
think
you
we've
touched on an
gotten away
interesting
from that?
thing.
Why
Yeah.
do you think we've gotten away from that? Because I mean, it used to be kind of a foundation and bedrock, but we've moved away because everything seemed to move toward a service economy.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a Votech school in my area close a number of years ago. You know, it's, you know, it just doesn't seem to get the support. It's like the predisposition is you must go to college. I don't think so. I look back a lot of guys and gals I graduated with that, you know, had no intention of going to college. Hey, they're running their own businesses today and are doing really, really well. You know, where do they even pick those skills up? I ask myself, and I don't know the answer to that. When I go back home, I guess I'll corral a few of them and say, how did you get to be so successful? Because the skills you need to run your business and start your business, you know, they weren't apparent in high school and or to Votech school.
So let me touch on something. Guys, let me ask you a question. We're talking in general people, is there a difference in degree? We're talking about the recruiting issues, retaining people, skills of the people. Is there a difference? And Barry, you touched on this about the idea of younger people getting ideas in certain disciplines. And we keep hearing in reference to the difficulties of managing and recruiting the Z generation. All right. So do you guys think there's any real factor differences that companies or employees need to consider when they look at Z generation versus the, you know, millennials versus, you know, the old guys like us, you know, should call it versus women versus men versus Southwest versus Northeast versus West Coast? What do you guys think about that? Versus technical versus labor versus professional services? Do any of these roles change?
Well, it was actually through an I4CP conference, and Jay, you may remember this, where you had a speaker at the tail end of the conference that came up and talked about doing a peer review study for a PhD thesis that looked at the differences allegedly between the generations and didn't find really anything that was statistically meaningful.
No.
And so I don't know about
By the
that.
way, I've done research on baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. You know, it's age more than generation.
You know, I mean, so when I look at that and I look at like my last circumstance, and when we put this out publicly, so I think I feel comfortable talking about it, but, you know, in manufacturing, the turnover through COVID, whatever, has been around 26% or higher, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we've been running less, or US Steel was running less than 4%. So we beat the Great Resignation handily. How did we do that? I mean, a lot of it had to do with building, in US Steel terms, a culture of caring, being very clear on our brand and being very strong on DE&I, and making sure that our move up the talent curve piece was a critical part of our enterprise-wide strategy, which also comprised of move down the cost curve and win in strategic markets. And having that strategic link around talent was key. And then really kind of great execution was the other piece of that that got us there. So there was no one silver bullet, but we were recruiting at or above availability for every classification. So we were finding ways. We did not accept. We understood that it was very hard and very difficult to recruit, very hard for technical jobs, but that was no excuse. The team was charged to find a way. That's what talent acquisition is for in an organization. It's your job. Go get it. And so community channels, maybe going old school and less technology, interestingly enough, was a winning hand. And we've talked about that as well in some other venues. But I mean, I don't know. I don't buy it. I mean, I've seen success, and it was a great team story at US Steel there. But I don't buy that you can't find the folks you need.
Yeah, Barry, I think you've experienced it with a number of companies that are our members in I4CP. Many of them have not experienced a great resignation, and it goes right to what Reg says and what you're saying. If you don't get your culture right, nothing else is going to matter. And your culture of caring and your purpose at HSS, these things will attract young people. Sometimes it's more than even compensation. Having meaning for work, having an employer that cares is important. And Reg, I'd love to hear you tell a little bit more about your culture too, because I know Barry, his story is phenomenal, and the US Steel story is phenomenal, what they've done in the last couple of years. And I'm sure he could go on forever. So, but what about you? I mean, you've talked a little bit about culture.
Yeah, no, I think culture is incredibly important. And I agree 100% with what Barry was saying. I think where I'll only differ a small degree is that sometimes what I think in the younger generation is they're more vocal about caring about some of the things that we in the older generation just kind of did the grin and bear it. You just kind of suck it up and you move along. The younger generation is more vocal. And I think that's a good thing. It leads to us pushing forward and being more thoughtful about diversity, equity, inclusion, and making sure our culture stays, strong. I mean, at HSS, we're proud about being a purpose-driven organization, and we tell everybody, our purpose is to help people get back to what they need and love to do better than any other place in the world. And we'll sing that praises from the day they start to the day they end, and remind them that they're here to help people get back and get better movement in their life and enrich their lives. And we want people who are on board with that purpose. So I think the only differences I see is I feel like the younger generation is just more vocal. They're more open about these things matter to me. I need to know, what the values of the organization are. Again, in the past, I was taught to go to work, put your head down, work real hard, and you'll do okay. The younger generation says, no, I want to know.
You come in
So,
before
Reggie,
the boss and leave after the boss.
Exactly. You had those lessons. Now it's like they want to question you. Do you really mean that? You put that in your values? Is that real? Is that serious? Are you serious about those things?
So, Reggie, I want to take a chapter from something Jay said to me not too long ago. We keep talking about the Z generation and how they're rebellious and they're demanding. And I take us back to the 60s and 70s when we all came along. We were the most rebellious community ever came along. We challenged everything. We demanded companies divest from South Africa. We demanded companies integrate. So to the degree that we're talking about all the young people making all these demands, are they really that different than what we were?
See, I don't think they're different. I agree with you. I think we talk about them because they're different from us. But different is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's where we are as a society. People are insisting on you holding to those values as an organization. That's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. It's evolution.
So, guys, we've been talking about the retaining, the recruiting, and then we had an inside one of the in the Q&A about needing to teach young people how to be employees. So that shifts me to that third concept issue, the managing staff, particularly how do you manage staff during a hybrid period? You got some employees who are coming in, so obviously, has that changed? You manage them because they're coming in with fewer people in the office. Does that change because you might have the manager being in the office and the employee being out of the office? Does it change because the employee's out of the office and the manager's in the office? How do you guys see you deal with that?
So I'll start here and just say that I think you do have to spend time re-educating managers and supervisors that they have to take a different tack when engaging staff. It used to be, it was kind of management by walking around. You get a chance to kind of walk around and chat with everybody and talk to people. Now you got, 5 Teams meetings and you may see somebody once a month. And I think just like any other good manager, you have to learn what works for each employee. You can't have one tool in the toolbox. You got to have several. So you got to know that for Reggie, you need to have a regular check-in. But maybe for Daryl, if you guys talk once every 2 weeks, and talk about what's going on, you're good. Or maybe when I talk to Barry, we got to spend 10 minutes talking about life first before we can engage. But those are just things that you learn as a supervisor anyway. You know, you have to manage each person a little differently. You want to be consistently fair, but you got to manage each person a little differently. And I think it just takes a little extra effort for people now when they're managing the hybrid workplace, because you just don't see people as often. So it's just giving managers the tools and equipment to kind of that they need to kind of manage the workforce. So we're
So
working at doing
Very,
that,
very,
reinforcing that.
I agree with you 10,000%. You know, you have to manage the individual and understand the individual. There's a corollary to this, and I'm a futurist, so I look at trends, but I also try to look at counter trends, because the trends never seem to come to fruition, because there's always these counter trends. We've seen a huge drop off in productivity this year. It just seems to drop off a cliff, and it had been increasing steadily for years and years and years. But the productivity has jumped off the lift. There has been, this whole thing towards managing people one-on-one. Maybe we've gone too far with the empathy and not enough on the productivity. Where do you think we are on that? Where do you think it's going to go in the future? Because empathy is very important today, and young people want to feel like you understand them and you understand their needs.
Okay. So my
that's a big one.
I'm looking to build a high performance organization, period, turn the page.
Yeah.
And purpose is critical and important, but I always go back to something I think I developed along the lines, no money, no mission. So if you're in a for-profit business, I mean, the mission can be super important, but if you're not making money, you got a problem. Mm-hmm. And so I think you can have your cake and eat it too, because I think a great leader in part listens intently to the employee, responds appropriately to the employee's needs, but you're not letting someone off the hook around, here are your deliverables. It's basic blocking and tackling. Here are your deliverables. Here's how you're expected to get your deliverables. Here's the measure of success, and go after it. And then, but building that camaraderie, that esprit de corps, that's to me always been part of the leadership imperative. And I don't see the future changing that. The leader has to eventually be respected, but respected for what? Just, empathy, yes, got to be, but you've got to hold people accountable to deliver, because I don't think it will change. If the leader doesn't deliver, there'll be a new leader.
Yeah, and I think you and I have discussed this before, the 3 Ps, the people, planet, profit kind of
Yes.
phenomena, that you got to treat people with respect and dignity. You got to have that sort of little bit of social responsibility to community and country or planet. And then you got to make a profit. You can't do the other two.
Yeah.
So guys, you both talk about the importance of the managers leading the people and guiding them and directing them. What I see so frequently in so many of the clients and companies I have is the people who hold the title manager are never trained how to manage. They're made manager because of their tenure with the institution or because they've completed the job. And the second thing is, when they're evaluated on the production roles they do in the company versus what they do in manage. They're never very evaluated on how they manage their people. They've never held accountable for failing to hold an employee as being a poor performer, unless because employee blows the company up, then it becomes a big issue. But just what do you guys think about what companies should be looking at in regard to that concern?
So I'll start and jump in there. I think you're right, Darryl. You bring up points that I think in every organization I've been in is always a struggle. Often people are promoted based on their technical skill or ability, and not necessarily their managerial skills. And what you need to do as an organization is invest a little bit and educate them and teach them how to be supervisors, how to be managers, because that's a whole different skill set that they may or may not have. And often people struggle because, these were your colleagues yesterday and now you're their supervisor. So that's a challenge. And I think in every organization, I feel like I've done the same thing. I've had to go back and say, hey, are we doing enough to make sure we're educating those first line supervisory and managerial employees. And I think in every organization I've been in, is when I get on board, one of the early things we do is kind of reinvest in re-educating and training some people at the first line level to make sure they have the skills. And then one of the things we tend to do is look at the performance evaluation process and make sure that the management of people is a component of how we evaluate people. I think Barry very eloquently said it, and he's right. Without the profit, none of the other stuff happens. You know, we'll often talk here that, you know, the money's not the most important thing, but it's what enables us to do everything else. So if we don't have it, we can't get things done. So you need to push people on the metrics that bring the dollars in. But, you know, for an organization to be successful, you got to have good people who can manage the staff and create the cultural environment that supports and engages people and keeps people satisfied and retains people. So it's all part of the cycle of having a strong culture, is making sure you hire the right people, you indoctrinate them into your culture, they're productive so the organization is financially successful, and you can kind of continue to keep them and grow them in the future.
So let me build upon that a little bit, and also build upon a couple comments that came in the Q&A. You know, are we measuring productivity wrong today? You know, we talk about the drop off in productivity, but you know, are we measuring it wrong? And I hear a lot today when I get on our calls with our members about burnout. And we keep asking the same people to do a little bit more, to do a little bit more, to do a little bit more. And the burnout factor seems to be high. In fact, when we asked our members, what is the biggest benchmarking statistic you would like to see? They talked about well-being. We would like to know what other companies are doing about the well-being of their employees, both psychologically, physically, and financial well-being. That's still a big issue, I think.
We made a pretty significant investment, you know, kind of starting as the pandemic hit, because you recognize, particularly being in healthcare, you recognize all the stressors that are on employees, and we kind of added staff and have now a chief wellness officer whose whole focus is about making sure that we're paying attention to well-being, expanding all our offerings regarding issues, teaching people. You know, we have a course that we call Mind Mastery, where we teach about people about, you know, kind of reeling in their thoughts and even doing some breathing techniques and you know, get them involved in yoga or meditation or anything that helps to renew them from a spiritual and emotional standpoint. And we try to spend time educating managers about making sure they're checking in with folks to make sure they're okay. We added additional resources, and we added a program to kind of have peer mentors for individuals to make sure to check in with folks, because again, the pandemic had a significant impact, particularly in the healthcare arena.
Right.
So it's a constant effort for us to kind of build on that and grow that. It's a program we're still continuing to grow.
Yeah, it seems like a natural in your industry based on what you've been through in the last 3 years. Barry, you know, you've had record profits in the last couple of years. You didn't get there by coddling employees. So the term productivity and burnout and you know, what we're asking people to do, go above and beyond, and the well-being of their psychological, financial, physical health.
Well, we have certainly brought psychological safety into the forefront at US Steel. So US Steel coined the term, you know, safety first in the early 1900s. We've morphed from physical safety to psychological safety, which includes well-being. And part of that story is, you know, we say we need best for all. Sorry, I got a child in the background here.
That's okay. It happens.
Working from
today.
home. I love
Yeah.
it. Would you like to see my granddaughter? But you know, it's part of our strategy is around you know, moving to a best for all kind of planet. And for us to execute our best for all strategy, we said we need best from all. You cannot get best from all if people are feeling burned out. And so we've upped things, and building on what Reg has to say, you know, things like tutoring support, elder care, child care support opportunities, trying to address those needs. Looked at beefing up our EAP or even changing the model there. I mean, are all things around psychological safety and well-being. So, I do think that is something that most companies will probably up their game in, would be a prediction from my point of view in the next few years. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So before we go any further, guys, I think we would be remiss if we didn't answer this question for people. Today's technology, with a lot of hybrid workers, are using high-tech monitoring equipment to see how focused they are on the screens, how many keystrokes they're hitting. And there are people who are concerned about that. Then all be issued a memorandum saying they're going to start seeing whether or not that might be a violation of law. What are you guys' thoughts about using all this high tech to monitor your remote workers?
I said it before, I'm horrified.
Yeah,
It's frightening to me too. That's not a road we want to go down.
that's an invasion as far as
I
I'm
mean,
concerned.
you're building a culture of caring, or whatever your term is going to be. You
Or
talk about
trust,
trust,
or
respect, and
trust.
dignity.
Right. Where's the
Yeah.
trust?
I mean, I'm glad the technology has that application, but I'm hearing your technology that reads your verbals like online right now. Are you fully engaged, Reg, or not? Or are you just smiling
You
there?
have to check the monitor and I'll let you know.
And the scary thing is it's accurate, but it's, I mean, I think there are other ways relative to productivity. And back to, do you have clear goals? Are they stretch goals? And are you holding people accountable? And, kind of going from there. But anyway, I'm horrified.
Yeah, I
Echo
don't
that.
think I'd want to work for that kind of company. 'Cause I like to take a nap in the afternoon. I don't care, what anybody says. I am blocking out time in my calendar to take my little nap. And I do what Dan Pink says. I do a nappuccino. So Dan Pink says that, caffeine doesn't kick in for about 20 minutes after, it goes through your body. So have a big caffeine or a cappuccino, then take a nap right then. By the time you wake up in 20 minutes, you're ready to go.
Power nap,
He
we
calls
call
a
it.
nappuccino.
So one last thing before we get ready to wrap up, a colleague of mine raised a question about something going in Canada, where what they're doing is when they're laying people off, they're paying them a partial amount of money they usually pay them, to have them sit on the sidelines and wait for the company to re-need their services. Have you guys seen or heard of this happening in the US? And what's your thoughts about this?
I haven't seen that happening here. It's not something that I think would work very well for us.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one either here. And I don't know that you would do it unless you really had some demonstrated need. It's hard for me to get my head around that one.
So in the old social contract area, and we're all old enough to remember, there used to be a social contract between the employer and the employee. And sometimes it was a job for life.
Mhm.
And I remember the times when that was before the 1980s, where that was a pretty big culture kind of lure for people that work for companies. I know of a company, digital equipment company, that used to do just that. They would give people like half pay to keep them on the sidelines, especially their technical engineers. And they would actually paint the walls in the mill. Their headquarters is called the mill. Paint the walls, et cetera, and do something. I gotta say, I don't think digital equipment's around anymore.
Yeah, that worked out
Well,
for us.
I will say there's maybe a twist to that when you explain it that way. I mean, in certain industries, if you're in manufacturing, you're highly incentivized on the shop floor. It isn't so much as a firm policy, but a guideline of like no layoff, if you will. But there, the times get tougher and the incentive goes away. People's base pay is already a lot lower than kind of the market for the role, because they've got this big incentive that they often have a good shot at earning. And that has worked for a few companies in the States that I'd be aware of.
But a layoff used to be, you're going to take 3 weeks off and you're going to come back. So now it's almost a permanent thing.
Yes.
Mhm. Well, gentlemen, it is 1 o'clock, and we appreciate your attention. We appreciate the audience's attention to the program.
And I
We
got to
hope
say, you two, only about 15% of the companies in our survey said they had healthy cultures. And we've got 2 of them right here. And I think it's because of the work of the CHRO that a lot of these companies have healthy cultures or they have toxic cultures. In fact, 30% said they had toxic cultures. versus 15% that said healthy cultures. So people on the line, they have a lot to learn from some of these companies that have healthy cultures and what they've done to actually build those healthy cultures.
So Reggie and Barry, Jay just set you guys up for getting phone calls from everyone in line. They ask him how to do what you guys have done. But I want to thank you guys. I want to thank the audience for his attention and wish everyone well as we go into this new year. And see you next month. Take care.
Thank you, Barry. Thank
Take
you.
care. Thanks, guys.
Let's go.